Wow, AJ, beautiful talk. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So, for everybody, this is the question. And I'm going to address 5 issues for this. The first one is, do we really want to do it for everybody? He took my position and now taking the opposite. Do we really, really want to do it in every single case? What is optimal stent deployment versus suboptimal? Do we actually know? How many knows what is optimal stent deployment? Raise your hand. Yeah, not that many, huh? Well, that's good. What is the data? IVUS versus FFR for optimal after stenting. We decide which of the two, and finally between IVUS and OCT. Do we really want to do it? Well, the data is there. There's a mortality benefit. But listen, we just finished this stent. Goes from the prox LAD, long prox LAD to the mid. It looks great. The attending says, well, so what do you think? And the fellow says, it looks beautiful. So do we really want to go through this? Well, Dr. Moreno, I'm not sure. You will need to convince me. All right. So let's go and talk about optimal. What is optimal? Is a very simple concept. Is you just take your reference diameter, proximal and distal, and you measure your minimal stent area after stenting, and it has to be greater than 90%. If the stent is too long, then just the proximal part you measure with the proximal and the distal with the distal. Okay, so we got a definition of optimal stent deployment. So we now know what is suboptimal stent deployment, and it's a predictor of major adverse cardiac events. Is it the patient? Is it the disease? It's not. It's us. We are the ones who are doing suboptimal stent deployment. And let's talk about it. You know, Prati did this beautiful paper, and he says 5 criteria for suboptimal: 200 microns wide dissections, malapposition greater than 200 microns, reference diameter less than 4.5, basically you're stenting on a plaque, MLA is less than 4.5, and intrastent plaque or thrombus thickening more than 500 microns. So very easy to remember what is suboptimal. You know, 200 microns for dissection, 200 for malapposition, less than 4.5 for reference diameter or MLA. So, question for the audience. What is the incidence of suboptimal stent implantation in patients with ACS? 10%, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40%. Okay, over 1,000 lesions, 31% were suboptimal stent deployment. What about FFR? Instead of doing stenting, I use FFR pre, let's do it post and see how it is. Well, this study shows that this is for a thorax center. This is not a simple, 621 post-PCI FFR, 291 was less than 0.9. What is that? It's 47% of suboptimal stent deployment by angiography, even after post-dilation. And what is that? The suboptimal process. And how is it distributed? You can have patients down here, but most of them are between the 0.80 to 0.88 are the ones. You want it more than 0.90. What are the clinical relevance? We can see it here. In-stent MLA less than 4.5, increased MACE, distal reference narrowing, increased MACE, distal edge dissection, and proximal reference narrowing. Malapposition and thrombus protrusion didn't have much impact. In this study that was recently published, it's called the REACT, FFR REACT, that means react, do something after. The angiogram looked good, but the FFR didn't look good. It got randomized, and then this is the control group, this is the experimental group. What happened after? We went from 3.4 to 4.25 minimal luminal area, and from 4.46 to 4.98, like a 0.5 millimeter square in the MSA. What about clinical outcomes? We have it here, 6 times lower. Classical type 2 error here, 6 times lower for the patient that underwent IVUS guided PCI. So please get a take-home message. Remember suboptimal stent implantation. Get accountability. It's important. Now, what is the data? Let's go quickly. We have historical data. So this is the problem, that too many of these trials have crossed the confidence intervals. So see? So through many years, there was a lot of papers saying, it doesn't change anything. So why doing it? Then most recently, we got some other data. But if you did this meta-analysis 7 years ago, you see that you have mortality benefit, you have MACE, and you have stent thrombosis benefit. Why? Because you increase your mean difference in the stent size in 0.33 millimeters. You increase. The bigger, the better. Very simple. What about randomized data? We have the first trial, the IVUS XPL, 1,400 patients. They were stents of 28 millimeters or longer, and we had 10.7 MACE at 5 years. If you do angiographic guided, reduce about 50%. Remember the number, 10.7%. But mortality was 3 times lower, but not statistically significant. It was not powered for mortality. Then we have the second randomized trial, ultimate trials, around the same number. This is now all comers. Very important. This is now selecting cases. This is all comers. And we have the same story, 10.7% here, reduced to 6.6. And we have now about 30% reduction in mortality, but not significant because of the power. But if you do optimal PCI at 3 years, you have 4% MACE. This is a beautiful. 4% MACE at 3 years in all comers. That's an unbelievable number. That's what we should be. Now, what about the randomized, the third trial? Dr. Sharma presented it this morning, very important trial. It's called complex PCI. And just because the first 4 indications were really complex, but the others 5 were not. More than 2 vessels treated or more than 3 stents, ISR, calcific, osteal lesions, that's about 80% of what we do. Randomization, 25% got OCT, 75% were IVUS, and the data is 1 year after. 1 year, we're not talking about 5 years, New England Journal of Medicine paper, mortality benefit. 1 year after, less than half, you reduce mortality at 1 year if you use IVUS or OCT. So is this really a selected group? I don't think so. Dr. Moreno, should we do it in selected groups only? I said, no, don't do it in complex cases only. AJ said, you must walk before you run. Get familiar, get happy doing it. For an old-timer like me, I remember between PTCA and stenting. What a beautiful change. Oh my God, we get safe. Then ROTA, and then the IVL right now, beautiful results. This is what you get when you go home happy. Even haziness, even all these things that you look in the angiogram, you don't know, and you look the perfect apposition. You don't even do an angiogram after you do a good OCT or a good IVUS after. So yeah, now let's talk about data. Now all comers and long DES, again, mortality benefit here. Doing the previous trial I showed you, but now we have strong data in all comers that you got mortality benefit. At the end, what about FFR or IVUS after? No difference. So if you want to use FFR, fine. If you want to use IVUS, fine. And IVUS versus OCT, 50% reduction by the Illuminating 3, and another 50% from 20 to 10% in major malapposition. So OCT is spanning very nicely. This paper is very good, actually, from Dr. AJ Group. You can see that tissue protrusion is much better with OCT. Stent malapposition, here you cannot tell, is much better with OCT. Same for edge dissections, and clear. They're so beautiful. Like this morning case, distal LAD, we saw that. And then the stent fracture. You can see it with the OCT, but we have to wait for the Illuminating 4, which is randomizing. It's already completed. I think by TCT probably we'll have the results of this OCT-guided versus angiographic-guided PCI. So in summary, do we really want to do it? Of course. We will save lives. Optimal versus, it's impossible to predict with angiography. I told you, I'll show you. So then better do it to be safe rather than sorry. Data supported imaging, plenty. We just need to define our favorite technique. And IVUS versus FFR, no difference, but IVUS or OCT will give you more information. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pedro. That was great. You know, I do think to make the counter argument, there are folks who will say that on an individual basis, it's going to be very hard to prove that it will be helpful in those cases. And that's true. It's just a challenge of knowing when and the familiarity issues that you've brought up. So I think it was a great demonstration with the cases. This was perfect, and it sets up the next debate as well, which is going to be a debate of atherectomy versus IVL.